recording. Hi, Dr. Rob.
Hi, Tammy. People are writing you all kinds of notes tonight.
I know. But we don't have a question because the question got lost. So, oh, here it comes. Okay, great. Oh, well, it was, I can't see that. So, thank you. People are putting nice messages in my ear. So,
Roof.
yeah.
That's what I'm listening to. My dog bark. I'm trying to think if there's something I want to say to you guys. Well, for those of you, I mean, lots of things I could say. First of all, what are you guys thinking? There's 31 of you here. Every time we do this, we'll end up with 5 people whose questions don't get answered. So please start your questions now. There's probably a husband next to you that you want to say, listen to what he said, or a wife, or so, here we are. We do this free every single week as best we can as a service. It costs you guys nothing. And trust me, when I was in early recovery, I couldn't talk to Pat Carnes or any of those fancy people, but you can ask us questions all day long. Tammy, should we talk about the weather? Oh, okay.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. People are being kind, so.
I mean, they're saying happy.
A question.
They're saying have a nice day to you. I understand.
Yes. I got older over the weekend. That's what happened. Well, but on the other hand, I did put in the chat before it left. So we had the Super Saturday Recovery Summit. I'll just share with you. So for those of you joining on the intherooms.com/home Super Saturday Recovery Summit, you can find Dr. Rob did a presentation on codependence last month, and that one is posted. And there's so many great topics, and the ones that were recorded this last Saturday will be posted then hopefully within the week. So, but join us on November 21st for the next Super Saturday Recovery Summit. My cat just moved, so sorry. The first question is, I'm a very intense love addict and I'm always obsessing about my husband. We are separated and I can't stop thinking he is cheating on me and I can't concentrate in anything else. I want to stop obsessing and ruminating. Any tools?
Well, I want to say every time that we do this that I don't know you personally and I can't speak to what your own issues are and what that all means to you. So I'm going to say it in a kind way, maybe not an addiction way, but more of a positive way, which is, and this is how I kind of look at life. If you've loved someone, if they've meant something to you, if you've been deeply attached to them and they're broken and it doesn't work out and they leave or you leave, I have this a lot, Tammy, where people say, why am I still thinking about them? Or when am I going to get them out of my mind? Or I can't. Look, if you love them and you really love them, it could be years before they really get out of your head. And every time you feel lonely, every time you wish somebody was there, every time you're watching TV and it's going to occur to you and you're going to feel bad and you're going to want to call them. So I don't know the difference between that and being obsessed. I can tell you obsession looks like I'm a stalker. I go to their house and drive by what they're doing in the morning. What are they doing in the evening? I call all their friends. I check their email. That to me is going over the line. But if you simply feel bad and longing and missing, I think that's very healthy. And sometimes I think we're too hard on ourselves. And something like grief, which is a very normal reaction to loss, when the person has been nice, we're like, well, I should not even be thinking of them anymore. And of course, connection is what it is. Just because you've been angry and disconnected doesn't mean they still aren't in your heart.
Can you talk a little bit? Yeah, well, I'd like to ask you, it says, I'm a very intense love addict and I'm always obsessing about my husband. And I'm just wondering, and I don't know this, but I'm wondering if someone is perceiving themselves as a love addict because they really intensely love their husband, because to me, that's very different than a love addict. What are your thoughts?
Right. Well, let me tell you what a love addict is. A love addict is one step up from a sex addict. Sex addicts objectify body parts. If your boobs, if your butt, if you want me, if you desire me, if I can get something going with you, if this porn looks good enough, which is an object, it's just paper, then I feel rewarded because I'm getting my needs met and at least for the moment, distraction. But love addiction is just one step up from that. It's using people as objects for love because you want to feel loved and you want to feel cared about and anyone will fit that category. Doesn't matter if they have it together or they don't. You fall in love with them, which means romance, and then you start obsessing about them, and then usually that makes them a little crazy and they start backing away, which makes you more obsessive. And then when that one doesn't work on, you move to the next bad relationship. The next bad relationship, always believing that this one will be different, when the truth is you're not really that motivated about who they are. You're much more motivated to how they leave you feeling. And to me, that's a 12-step program thing. For me to begin to learn how to love for the sake of love and not because it's going to make me feel better or whole or lonely, to love because someone deeply moved me and I want to be closer to them. That's also not like, I don't want to be alone and I'll take anybody who will fit the spot. So love addiction in some level is really about desperation. So both of them, sex addiction is too about desperation. I think sex addiction is about desperation to get rid of the feelings I have right now and just move on and make it all go away. Love addiction is a healthy longing for connection combined with a whole lot of bad ability to create it. How's that?
No, that's very helpful. So, and I hear the 12 step. I'm also thinking that probably very much like, anything else with addiction, there's underlying issues. So having some professional support to help look at what might be driving that could be very useful.
And we do make referrals. Just again, we don't get kickbacks, but you can always write TAMI, T-A-M-I, Tammy at seekingintegrity.com, or me. By the way, you say, I'm just following this, I think this person said they have a psychologist. Therapists are great, therapists are wonderful, but if they're not trained in the addictions, they don't know how to work with it. It's a completely, we have a saying in therapy, behavior problems require behavioral forms of treatment, which means if you have a problem with depression, anxiety, confusion about your job, you have lost your mom, you don't know which way to turn in life, any kind of therapy will do as long as you feel comfortable with the person and it's useful. But if you have a behavior problem, like constantly going out the wrong ways, obsessing about the wrong people, hurting yourself, starving yourself, something that has to do with behavior, gambling, it requires a much more direct and directive form of treatment, almost more like going to a doctor and saying, what do I do, doctor? And we say, here's what you do, and then we hold you accountable. That's part of it. That doesn't happen in regular psychotherapy. You go into traditional psychotherapy and people say, how you doing? And they're more responding to what's going on with you. So I might bring my spouse in, I might bring in my angry day, and we usually end up in the right place because that's the entry point. But that's different than someone who has an addiction of any kind. We're not ready to take on the business of doing that deeper work on some level because we're already running away from it every time we act out. So I'm pretty sure in my belief system that we need a stable foundation of sobriety before we're able to start to grow. By the way, this person keeps saying, my psychologist said, I say go to an SLAA meeting and deal with some people who have the issue you have. And instead of talking to some fancy person who's paid to talk to you, they're not wonderful. I've had 35 years of therapy, maybe 25. However, if you have this issue, you need to be around other women who have the same issue without paying for it so that they can support you and you can support them and you can start to build the kind of relationships that will lead you into healthy dating. So even if you have the best psychologist in the world, you're not going to be able to call him on a Saturday afternoon and say, I'm going on a date and I want to call you later. SLAA. For sure. Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. I don't believe in CODA because I don't believe in codependency. And so I really think it's a very kind of labeling negative place to be called codependent. So I would never refer anyone to CODA. And you're welcome.
Oh, and one thing I'd like to tag on is there's a female sex and love addict group on Tuesday nights, a drop-in group just for women, moderated by Lacey Bentley. She does a great job. It's a
I love
safe
Lacey.
space for, yes, it's a safe space for women. Dr. Rob has many females on his In the Rooms group on Friday nights at 6 p.m. Pacific time. There's spaces, and please join them. I think you'll find kindred spirits and the help that you will be most useful in supporting you. So.
By the way, you can reach out to Lacey, Dr. Lacey, or to Lacey Bentley. She handles a lot of our love addiction and porn addiction in women. If Tammy wants to give you that, that's fine, or we can connect you to her. She also is going to, I think, take over In the Rooms, where I'm at every Friday, one Friday a month, to do a women's night to talk about women's issues with porn, women's issues, because we so often focus on the men. So we have resources available to you, both for you to drop in and visit and talk to people and use us. And there is one thing I would say, one more thing. There's some of the 12-step programs don't have very good books to read about their program, but the Sex and Love Addiction, the Sex and Love Addicts 12-step guide, like their book, Sex and Love Addicts, is really great. There are a lot of stories in there about men and women who struggle with the desperation around relationships. And I think if you read the SLAA Big Book, you will find a lot of kind of comfort in what other people have to say, because it'll sound familiar.
Next question. Hello, we've been married 15 years, have 3 kids, and he's in his first year of recovery. We are both seeing separate CSATs and reading Vicki Tidwell Palmer's book on boundaries. She says one common non-negotiable boundary is repeated deception or lying. Can you define repeated in this circumstance?
Well, first of all, Vicki's a friend of mine, and I know her really well, and I think she does great work. And I'm glad that you found her work, because I think, you know, it's very hard to find what we need. There are other books I would recommend also looking at. I think Stephanie Carnes, Dr. Carnes' daughter, just wrote a book for partners and relationships. There's a bunch of them out there, and I would take a look at all of them. So in terms of boundaries, and that question was specifically, Tammy.
Can you define repeated in the
Oh, right.
for repeated
So,
deception or lying?
so addicts lie, and we're going to lie, and we're going to keep lying. And the issue is not whether we lie. We will lie. If I tell you I'm going to take out the garbage this morning, and you say, great, that's really important to me, and I come home and you find I haven't taken it out, I'm going to say, oh, well, the wheel broke on the garbage can. Like, I'm never going to want to say I forgot, because you might be mad at me. So I will just lie just to look good, or we do that. It's automatic. What's more important is, can we come back to you and say, you know, this morning or last night about the garbage, like, I give my clients, or I would give my spouse 24 hours or 48 hours. I know you're going to lie to me. I know when I come to you with that face that says, what were you doing? You're going to want to lie. So what I would expect you to do is to be honest with me within 24 hours or whatever you set. And I think rather than, we're going to lie. Tammy knows of my car situation recently. Okay. So recently I wanted a really fancy car, and I deserve it because I've worked really hard and I should have it. And I didn't have a car. So I spent a lot of the COVID period looking for it. And I finally found the perfect car, exactly the old car, exactly what I wanted, you know, all that kind of stuff. And it was a little expensive. And I thought, well, I don't think we can really afford this, but I'm going to take a little money from here. I'm going to take a little money from there. And I don't have to tell my husband about this, because he wants me to get a car. And it's a little expensive, but I'll pay down the price. I mean, I had the whole thing organized, but I knew I was going to have to come to him and say, I found this car and I want it. And he said, well, can we afford it? And I said, oh, sure. And he said, are you sure? And I'm like, absolutely. But I sort of knew we couldn't. And so what I did was I called my financial manager, this guy who handles my whatever. And I said, what do you think I should do? And he said, well, from a karmic perspective, it's from a financial perspective, it's probably better you don't buy the car. From a karmic perspective, it's probably better that you go along with your husband. And you know what I mean about that is, addicts will always, I'm 35 years into recovery, 25 years of therapy. I still think of myself first many times. And this reminds me also about, I do have a podcast, in case you haven't heard it. It's called Sex, Love, and Addiction. Tammy, we had 8,000 downloads last week, so we're still quite busy at that show. But one of the podcasts I do on that show is with a gentleman called Dr. Stan Tatkin, Tatkin. And at that time, he'd written a book called We Do, which is about people getting married. We do. Notice it doesn't say I do, it says we do, which I absolutely think was the right title. And one of the things he said to me is, you know, the key to a successful relationship is that your first thought when you want to do something important is, what will my spouse think? And the second thing, is this going to be really, the first question is this going to be good for my relationship? If I want to go out buy a sweater, if I want to go buy a car, if I want to go meet an ex somebody, I want to make sure in my head that since the most important thing in my life is my family and home, I want to make sure that I'm coming to any choices with a perspective of what's best for us rather than what's best for me. I think addicts tend to, and the car example is great. I come out, I want this, I can have this, I can make it work. And I could have made it work. And he probably never would have known. But on the other hand, that's not who I am anymore. I got really far into, I had the money, this and that. I showed a picture to Tammy. I mean, I was there. And then I realized it wasn't going to be good for my relationship. And 4 months of car shopping went out the window because my relationship is more important than my getting that car. And I did not get it, by the way. And I will always, part of me will always regret. Always think about that car that got away. But you know what? Someone's making me steak for dinner tonight. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
So, okay, next question. Any success stories that we're willing to share? I'm really in need of hearing some positive, because some days I lose hope that our marriage will survive.
Well, I think the first thing to say is you're not alone. And I think every partner who goes through this process on one level and they wonder if they'll survive it, they wonder if the relationship will survive.
I don't know.
You are really not already, because we have.
I don't know. Are
I
you
lost you,
freezing
Tammy.
up?
Did we freeze
Yeah.
up?
Well, you did, but I don't know if it was you or me. I'm not getting a message that my internet
No.
is okay. So say that. Start over.
Well, what
Now
did
I'm
I
freezing.
say?
You said the first thing I want to say is.
All right. Well, hold on to that. I think every partner feels the way you do. Partners wonder if they're going to get through, if the relationship is going to get through, all of those things. And I think this is very normal and very typical. And the longer you've been together, I think the harder it is, especially when you look at that person and say, oh my God, I don't know who they are. You are someone who I strongly suggest attend some of the partners groups. We have 4 of them running, I think, on sex and relationship healing. They're all free. There's some for young women who have kids and they're still, at that stage of life. There's some for older folks whose kids are grown and gone. There's all kinds of meetings, and just sitting in those rooms and listening. My relationship made it. Mine didn't. This is what we did to get better. You need more than I can give you. You need other women who are going through this. And yes, what is it? Yeah. Oh, sorry. I read what you said. You're never going to be fully reassured. You will always wonder. My metaphor for this is like this. If I had my own business and I ran a restaurant and I had this young kid who was working for me and he really needed the money and really needed the work. So I let him work for me because I wanted to help him out and all that. And then one day, after a year of doing great, I came in early and I saw he was in the safety deposit box. And he said he was just getting petty cash, but when we really talked about it, he was taking a little bit of extra money he needed for his family. I mean, it was legitimate, and I think that was true, but he was in the safety deposit box. So we had a long discussion about it. I wrote him up, all that stuff. So ever since then, well, for the next couple of years, he's a great employee. This is a true story. Great employee, never any problems, really, But one day his boss came in and saw him in the morning at the safety deposit box, and he probably was doing certain. But what do you think went right through the head of that? I think I said it was me. It wasn't me. That person who ran the store. Even though it had been 3 years, even though they'd forgotten all about it, even though they were doing great, seeing him back at that safety deposit box, immediately he went to, oh, I wonder if he's stealing again. And in that way, I think you partners will always suffer from less and less over time. But what else is going on? What don't I know? What did it mean when he just did that? Why is he reading that, or she? This is part of the challenge, a lifelong challenge that you will face living with one of us. It doesn't mean we're out there doing anything. But it does mean that you will never trust us in the same way you did before. And that's how it goes.
And for me, I've got a starfish ornament. There's a whole story, but I've got lots of stories of people who have found healing and are moving forward. Eyes wide open, understanding, like Dr. Rob just said, it's not, oh, now everything's all better. But it really is, if you're seeing that the addict is digging into recovery, not just, going to their therapist once a week. I answered an email earlier today. He's going to a therapist for 45 minutes once a week. How is that going to change a lifelong pattern? That is not enough. There won't be any significant change. So if you're seeing that the addict is actually doing things and really making a committed effort, you're going to start seeing that there's more and more reasons to have a little hope and have trust. I would also, for you partners, please do connect with other partners. Not all of them, are in a relationship that's going to survive, but for those that do, it's a very different relationship than the lies and the false foundation that you thought you had. So.
Well, I would also add, just in terms of the partners groups, that a lot of women and men who are cheated on really start to doubt their own attractiveness, their own intelligence, their own love, like maybe I wasn't enough for this person. And going to that partners group and looking across the room, obviously you're online, look across the Zoom, how about that? Looking across the Zoom and seeing another man or woman who's been through what you've been through, and they're intelligent and they're attractive. And it's like, oh, it isn't just me and I don't have what it takes. It's a lot of these folks who seem perfectly okay. Maybe this happens to other people. It's not just about me not being good enough or not being loved enough or whatever. Just that moment of, oh, I'm not alone in this and this isn't about me is hugely healing. And then there's everything that comes after. Hey, Tammy,
Yes.
do you know that we're wearing the same colors tonight? Did you see that?
I did not see that, but I've got my Diamondback shirt on because I was like in mourning that I can't go to any games this year. So,
Well,
but
we're wearing the same colors.
I can wear my bling Diamondbacks shirt. So anyway, okay. So next question. My
I think
ADHD.
Mars must be in retrograde.
It is. My ADHD is really out of control at times and seems to be related to the degree of stress. While at Seeking Integrity, Laura spoke a lot about the work of Gabor Mate, and I have watched some of his YouTube videos. I started listening to his book on ADHD today and got to the end of the first chapter. And unless I'm mistaken, he suggests that ADHD is a maladaptive solution to help us avoid pain related to childhood trauma. Do you agree with this? And if so, does that possibly mean that I have to do trauma work in order to move ahead? Huh.
Um, I do not believe ADHD has any basis in trauma. I think ADHD can be escalated by trauma, or it can become more profound related to trauma, or you might have a worse case of it because of trauma. In other words, if you're distracted by things going around in your environment, traumatic, difficult things, and you're also dealing with this issue around focus and concentration, but you also are spacing out in relationship to some trauma. I mean, it's a lot of things to deal with. Yes, people, first of all, Gabor Mate is not a therapist and he's not a psychiatrist. So he has beliefs and they're lovely. And I love some of the things he says. They're very spiritual, meaningful. But Laura would tell you, one of our staff members, you know, he's coming from a spiritual place, kind of like a Deepak Chopra, but his actual understanding of psychiatric issues is not that great. So number one, 20% of sex addicts also have ADHD. It's one of the few psychiatric issues we can actually tie research-based to this problem. So you're in the right room if you have ADHD and you have a sex addiction or an addiction that probably are related. They both have something to do with a similar part of the brain. ADHD is a genetically based brain problem. Your brain doesn't work right. And unless you take the right medication, your brain isn't going to work right. Oh, obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, is a brain disorder. There's something wrong with those people's brains too. They don't want to keep washing their hands and counting things, but that's what their brain tells them to do. So you can have trauma and it will escalate like I had for years, a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, absolutely from how I grew up and a lot of the trauma, and I didn't handle things and all of that. But it never fully got better until I went on medication, because I get depressed, and no amount of therapy, no amount of trauma, or no amount of anything. In fact, I'll just say this even more strongly. I've worked with a lot of people over 25 years of being licensed. And I think that, and Tammy might be surprised, but I think at least 50% of the mood, focus, and concentration problems need medication. So many clients come in now that I've been seeing, and they've been through, you know, pretty good programs, some of them famous, some of them really expensive, and they got on that little track as a sex addict and they went through it. But what they didn't identify, because that's not what they think about in places like that, is this person has ADD. They'll never get sober. A lot of times people come out of addiction treatment programs, and your treatment plan is you're a love addict, you're a food addict, you know, you need more nurturing. That's all true. But you also might have some psychiatric issues. My brain doesn't work right. It doesn't matter what childhood I went through, my brain still wouldn't work right. But there is one thing called epigenetics. One of my favorite things I've learned about. Tammy, you know about epigenetics. So we have genetic structure that can be influenced. In other words, I have traits of depression because my mother was bipolar. So absolutely, there's the possibility, and it's a strong one, that I'm going to inherit her traits. But am I going to be a depressed person? And epigenetics is the study of how our genes express themselves based on the circumstances we're in. So I might have genes that are prepared for depression, but I have the most loving, nurturing, supportive. They're not going to, I'm not necessarily going to become depressed or have problems with depression because those genes don't express themselves as depression, because in my upbringing, I had support so much that I grew beyond, I grew strong. However, if you went through this awful childhood, but because I had so much trauma that it triggers the depression and stress, when I get stressed out, it reminds me of the trauma. And so, yes, you have to pick these things apart, but ADD and ADHD and OCD are brain issues. They don't get better without medication. Then you can look at the trauma underneath, if there is any. How's that, Tammy? Did I do good?
That was good. And I put the link for Dr. Todd Love's video on In the Rooms. There's a life expectancy decrease if your ADHD is not treated. So please take this seriously. It is a medical issue. He did a great job. He's done tons of research. So he is qualified to answer that question. So I put the link in the chat. Feel free to click on that and learn more. Okay, next question. Is there a group for just live addicts? I really think this would be helpful for me, but I'm worried I'd be too triggered with the meeting having sex addicts in attendance also.
Can you maybe explain that question? I'm not entirely sure.
So
Excuse
to
me.
me, I'm afraid if I go to a meeting with other addicts, I'm going to get triggered. Oh, was supposed to say
Well, why
love
don't you start that?
addicts.
Because I think that
Well,
you
it says
could.
was supposed to say
She said, why don't
love
you go ahead and
addicts.
start, Tim?
Well,
Why don't you go ahead and start?
I don't know of any meeting for just love addicts. I mean, do you? Because like SLAA is
You
sex
got to
and
go to
love addicts.
SLAA.
Yeah, that's the only one I know. And
But
I
that
think it's
doesn't.
fair to talk about your triggers. I mean, but and find a safe sponsor, etc. So.
Well, if you're a man and you're attracted to women, don't go to meetings where there are women. If you're a man and you're attracted to men, kind of avoid the solo men's meetings and go to mixed meetings. I mean, it's really about putting yourself in a safe place. I'll give you an example. I used to go to meetings. I'm gay, so I'm attracted to men. And I used to go to men's meetings. And if you're a sex addict, there's always one person in the room. They may be the least ugly person in the room, but that's the person you're going to look at because they're the least ugly or the most attractive. And I remember one night I was sitting across the room many years ago, like in the 90s somewhere. I was sitting across the room from someone and I couldn't stop looking at them. And I thought, oh my God, this is really triggering. What do I do? And then a little voice came in my head because I've had a little experience with this. Go sit somewhere else. Oh, I can move my seat and just not look at them and I'm not facing. How simple is that? So yes, you may be triggered. I mean, you certainly will be triggered if you see people who are of your attraction, men, women, whatever, who are attractive. I would try to avoid those meetings. If you're a heterosexual man, go to heterosexual men's meetings or etc. The other thing is, like Tammy said, you talk about it. You say, oh, when this person said that, I kind of got triggered or I felt uncomfortable. So I don't know what you mean by triggered. I don't mean if you're going to see someone at the meeting and you're going to want to offer them. I guess for a love addict, it would be more about obsessing. Like I start thinking about this person. They seem really sweet. Now I went to another meeting and I'm looking at them all the time. What I would do is get an accountability partner around that. I would find someone else in your 12-step program and tell them, I keep looking at this person. When we go to a meeting together, would you help me out? Or after my meeting, can I give you a call? Or this is not something you have to do by yourself. And I wouldn't be ashamed. I can't tell you how many years I went to meetings and I thought, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I didn't do anything about it, but I felt it. And maybe that's part of your growth too, is seeing people you're attracted to and feeling those feelings and not running from them and not acting on them, which is, by the way, called healthy.
Yeah, and the only way we get better is in community. So the best place for us to be is in the places, a live meeting. So please, and we've got drop-in groups for males or females on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. Please look at the calendar under events and you'll see what's offered when. You were going
I
to
just want to say to Tammy, if I had to live my life, I think we're out of sync. That's what I think. If I led my life, I don't think I'm in this room. I'm going to come back.
You're here. Oh, well, okay. So for those of you, I think it's him, but I don't know if it's him or if it's me. You guys can hit chat, but I think I'll ask him to take his background off because that takes up a lot of bandwidth. Maybe cut your background because I think it's you and your bandwidth, but I'm not 100%. Now it's not me. So you're muted, and take off your,
Okay, I'm unmuted.
okay, then
And
take off
let's
your
give it one more
background.
try.
Okay.
So I know what I was going to say. Isn't that amazing? Uh, if I had to walk around the world making sure that I never ran into a trigger, I would just have to stay home all the time and never use my computer. People are alcoholics. They have to pass bars by. People they go to dinner parties. People drink. It's not about avoiding the triggers. It's about being able to be safe inside of yourself with those triggers. And yes, I'm not saying that an alcoholic is in early recovery should go to a bar. I don't think we should hang around people we're really attracted to and try to make friends with them at this point. But the fact that you see someone and you're attracted and you obsess a little bit, you talk about that and you deal with that. You don't just, as long as you don't act on it, obsess away.
You're exactly right. And I was thinking, and you'd have to shut your curtains, and you'd have to, I mean, like, I don't even know how you could make your world so safe that you are never triggered, because, you know, my head could be a trigger. So, you know, it's one of those things where learning how to talk about it, learning how to acknowledge it, and not obsess. For me, it's not obsessive. If I talk about it, if I told Rob, I'm thinking about da da da, I've shared it. It's out there. It's no longer a
She's
secret.
not
I'm not holding on
alone.
to it. Yes, exactly. So next question. I'm a recovering male SA. I have used sex and relationship healing so much. Oh, that's good. It's my go-to site. We cannot afford counseling, so that makes this so much harder. My wife is wanting physical intimacy to feel wanted again. I want that also. We have worked hard on rebuilding our communications with each other, and I feel our relationship is going well. But when my wife initiates sex, I get too deep in my head, and I'm afraid of touching inappropriately and triggering her. Are there any tips or tricks to get out of my head and enjoy the intimacy with my spouse again? First thought, Bill and Ginger Burkhaw's book
Well, I think
on sexual reintegration is what first thought came to my mind. What about you?
you want to put that into the chat since you brought it up. Make you work if you're gonna bring stuff up. You gotta bring it to the people. I agree with Tammy. The Burkow's book is really, really good. It's called Sexual Reintegration, and it is for couples who've dealt with cheating and infidelity and how to begin to approach each other. But let me just give you thank you, Tammy. A thought about that, you guys. What is sex? You know, and what do people really want from it? Except when you're 19 to 20, under 24. Maybe what you want from sex is something different. But when you're in a long-term partnership, I'd assume you want it as a form of connection and relationship and meaning, and then there's just getting off. But I think it's a really good idea to take it really slow. To your spouse, I would say, as I say to every spouse, don't have sex with anyone you don't trust. And I'm not saying, you know, they can't trust you and they can't trust us fully, but do you feel a sense of trust more or less with us? That might be the time to be sexual with us. I think a lot of partners, just to speak of you guys, you'll have sex with us for the wrong reasons. You just found out everything and you feel so relieved to know what's been going on. You feel closer to us. Or you're afraid that we're going to leave if you don't really, because we're so sexual. Maybe you should have a lot of sex with us and then we won't go out and do what we were doing. But none of those are good reasons to have, or if you have a lot of sex, maybe we'll want to work it out, whatever it is. None of those are good reasons to have sex. So to your partners, if you're beginning to trust us, that's a reason to be sexual. But to you, it's about really going slow and letting your partner initiate. How about, honey, I'm going to rub your shoulders. I'm going to a little massage oil. And then why don't you take it from there? I'm just going to rub your shoulder. In other words, why don't you let her run the show? And, you know,
But he
also
says,
there,
when my wife initiates sex, I go deep in my head.
then you stop and you say to her, honey, I really love what you're doing, but I'm finding myself spacing out a little bit. You don't have to tell her you're thinking about Go-Go Girls you saw 10 years ago. Just tell her you're feeling spaced out. You've left the moment. Can you get back to it? And that might mean you got to hold hands and start again and look at each other's eyes and start again. And it's really about your learning the point, because trigger to me in a partnership sometimes has a little bit to do with trauma and past history. You know, I feel this coming toward me and I can't handle it, so I disappear and I go think about other things. I would suggest you go a lot slower. You redefine what sex is. Maybe you need to spend a month holding each other. Maybe you just need to spend a month just doing massage. I mean, there are a lot of ways to meet the needs that have to do with physicality and being held and loved that aren't necessarily, it's amazing how long you can go without sex and still feel incredibly loved and happy. So I would work on all of those before I worry as much about sex. And then finally, if this is a huge issue that repeats over and over again, it's a therapy issue, and I would go talk to somebody about it as a couple.
Okay, and I did put Bill and Ginger Burkhardt's information in there, so check that out. So the
Thank
next
you, Tammy.
question, what books, resources are most helpful for the betrayed spouse whose partner is choosing the addiction over family and recovery? That's so painful.
Well, there are two books that I wrote for that arena, which I would really recommend. I've written 12, so it's not like I'm just pulling back books out of a hat. Like, here's my only book. But I do try to recommend things that I really know are good for this situation. And one of the books is Prodependence. It's a complete 180 turn on codependence. And it puts a much more positive, strength-based, loving spin on the people who just love us addicts and disturbed people. For some reason, codependency has pointed the finger at our partners and said, what's wrong with you for loving us? As opposed to our saying, thank you so much for loving us. You're amazing for hanging in there. And let's celebrate that rather than picking it apart. So I would read Prodependence because it will give you yourself put you more at peace around, a lot of partners think, well, I had something to do with this. If I just done this, or I just done that, or this person was doing this long before you met them. And no matter, you could dance on the head of a needle and they would still go and do this because it is their problem. But when you get betrayed, when you get hurt like that, we always look to, gosh, if I'd said this or done that. That's the reason I wrote Codependence, is to give you some peace around that. The other thing, I mean, Tammy, I don't know if you'd recommend in this circumstance, but there's a book called Out of the Doghouse, A Cheating Man's Guide to Healing Relationships. And I wrote this book because most men I know don't have a clue about healing a relationship with a woman who they've betrayed. They think candy, flowers, and in 90 days, we should be going on vacation together. They don't realize it's going to take a year and a half. And so I wrote Doghouse to tell men exactly where they stand and what it really takes if they want to restore their relationship with a betrayed loved one. And so I'll just be on the side of us addicts. We don't always know what to do. We come home, you're angry. We come home, you're upset. We come home, we never know where we're going to come home to. You love us, you hate it. I mean, you guys are all over the map. And so it's very hard for us to necessarily figure out how to be anything except exactly as we are. But I hear from a lot of you spouses, and Tammy will say this too. Well, he or she's in recovery and they're not acting out anymore, but they're still a jerk. She's still awful to me. And I think you have to understand that it takes sobriety, and healing from the active behavior can start taking place right away. But becoming a really good, kind, compassionate person, that could take a while. And just because someone has stopped the behavior and feels terrible about it, wants to make it better with you, doesn't mean they're not narcissistic or difficult or unempathic, or that takes more work. So I did write this book so that you guys could know exactly what you deserve and what you should expect. And then you should take it and throw it at the person who cheated on you and say, here it is. This is what you need to do if you want to heal things with me. I know that's not as direct as answer as you would like. And Tammy, I really would love any suggestions you have.
Well, I also included in the chat Sophia Caudle's grief group, because there's grief around, I mean, that your relationship isn't how it is supposed to be. I guess I don't know if you're choosing to stay or choosing to go, and that's a whole nother topic as well. But having just had Sophia on the In the Room Super Saturday Recovery Summit last Saturday, the video will be coming out this week. But I was really thinking how much of a grief issue that would feel like to me. That, this relationship, this person's choosing, all of that would be a huge loss. So I would invite you to do some grief work around that. And she's got a couple of grief groups on the In the Rooms platform each week. So, choosing to go. So, on fair, good. I'm still at grief, but I'm glad you're choosing for you. So that sounds like the right choice. And you're still, you're still
Tam,
be on or on our groups, for betrayed partners. That there are people that have chosen to go. There's still support. So,
I'd like to touch on that really briefly, Tammy. The do I stay or do I go kind of thing.
Yes, go.
Am I still freezing up?
No, well, I can hear you. So go ahead.
Okay. So I would say about so I've been doing this work for about 25 years, and I would say probably 90%, 90%, that's a lot. 90% of the couples, maybe 80% stay together. They stay together because they have so much more going on than just this. There's so many years, there's so much experience, there's so much that's shared that they'd have to pull apart. And, you know, both of them, if they're working on this, can see down the road to a time that might be better. So really most couples, despite this, really tend to stay together and work it out, provided the person's healing. Mostly the couples I see not stay together are couples that are fairly new. They're 2 or 3 years out, and that spouse has been cheated on, turns around and says, oh, I get it. I'm not up for another 20 years of this. And, you know, they're not quite as trapped as those of us who've been in relationships longer. So let's go see something else about that. Oh, no open
Oh, I've
questions,
moved it
Tammy. You
to
denied
answered.
me.
Yeah, no, sorry. Go to answered and you'll
I
see it.
know.
It
I
was
don't, do I have that? I don't know if
what books and
oh, I
resources
see
are
answered.
most helpful for the betrayed spouse when a partner is choosing the addiction over their family recovery?
Right. So I was talking about staying or leaving. And I think that the first thing I want to say is if you partners want to leave, please don't tell us that unless you mean it. I've had a lot of partners say, oh, if you do that, I'm leaving again. And you really mean it. If we act out again, you're going to leave. And I get it, but we're probably going to act out again. We have slips. It's part of our recovery. And don't let any addict say, by the way, I got this perfect and I haven't acted out in 3 years. I doubt it. We struggle. You partners don't want to know that. And we don't want to tell you that. I'm not saying we struggle with the other person or doing it in the way that we did, but we might still struggle with porn or obsession, or it doesn't just go away. So, I think we need a little room to be imperfect and struggle without being told we're going to be left. But here's the thing. If you say to me, if you do this, or if you act that way, or any of this, whatever it is you have strong feelings about, if you do that, I'm going to leave you, you better leave. Because the minute I do that again and you don't leave, I understand how much power I really have, because your word doesn't mean anything. And you make all the threats in the world, but I can get away with what I want. It's a really good lesson for an addict. So don't threaten that. I really mean it. I'm going to take a time out. I might, you know, but whatever you threaten, you better be sure that that is what you intend. Because again, addicts will take that and run with it. I think if you're going to try to stay together and you really have strong feelings about each other, it's a year. What we say to couples who come to us and they really want to work on it is, we want you to put your relationship in what I'd call a safe harbor. Put it somewhere, the two of you, for 6 months or a year, where we're not going to divorce, we might separate, we're not going to divorce, we're not going to take any big actions. We're going to agree that things might be rough for this period of time, but while we're in therapy, while we're working on it initially, we're agreeing to stay together. And that means that gives space for the anger, the hurt, the disappointment, the challenges that the addicts have, because no matter how much challenge there is, you're willing to give it until that date or that time to consider how things are going. And I think that's really helpful, because if you're a partner and you're sitting there in this, well, if she does this again, I'm going to leave, but then I might want to stay, but then I love you, but then you did this and I hate you. It's really hard. Like, you come home and you're angry at us about something, and then, the next day. So I really think having a plan, unless someone's being abusive to you, hitting you, actively acting out, lying about it, not working on this at all, which is a whole different set of, but if they're really sincere and trying, and you are too, it's a year of saying, we're going to tolerate everything that's going on while we're in the active process of healing this. And we'll look at not being together after we do that. So anyway, that's just a little thought about stay together, don't.
Thank you. So the next question is, someone that I met on an online substance recovery meeting approached me sexually and started flirting with me in private chat. He said that his AA sponsor told him that he should honestly disclose everything to someone he's interested in. He told me his entire life baggage and issues within hours of meeting online. I felt overwhelmed, although I liked him saying nice things about how I look. Is this normal to disclose everything so quickly, to be honest and transparent?
Well, I can only tell you what I think. I don't know what his sponsor said. You don't know what his sponsor said. So whatever he said about that, who knows? I think that people who run to disclose everything about themselves really, really quickly are actually, their goal is to not be left. They want to get everything out there in front, so that whatever version of it they tell, so that if you're going to leave them, they're going to leave them right at the beginning, and they don't have to worry about that. They're not invested. Because real intimacy is about letting you in a little bit at a time, and a little bit at a time, until we're close enough where I want to let you know all of it before we take a move, like move in together, whatever that is. So, Tammy, do you have any comments about this one?
Well, to me,
It's a good question.
yeah, two things. It feels overwhelming. That, I mean, that feels like it was probably him telling you everything, a one-way conversation. So, you know, and the only thing that I hear, I liked him saying nice things about how I look. So that's an extra. So he's telling you all this garbage stuff, and he's commenting on your physicality, and it feels lopsided and not how intimacy, which is I want to get to know you. Tell me about yourself and all that. So this would, to me, would be a run, don't walk, but it, you know, it's entirely up to you. You may want to approach it again and say, you know, I'd like to start over. And, but we talk, you know, in different groups and things. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was
Dump,
like, don't run,
dump
don't
them.
walk. Yeah, yeah. To
You
me,
know, and besides, someone who, sorry, go ahead, Tammy.
no, I was just thinking though, it's like, you know, it's like you start off, it's like dating, you know, like sex addicts go right to sex. But dating is
It
really
is
getting to
dating.
know you. It's, you know, having coffee, having a conversation. This feels like not a conversation. So,
By the way, for many people, and Tammy would agree, this dating is about having sex and finding, you know, but not for us. I mean, she's not one of us, but not, she's alcoholic, but not for us. Like, I have to follow dating rules. I have to take my time. I have to figure out when it's appropriate to say things to introduce sexuality. I have to date consciously because I have issues with intimacy and sex and relationships. So, by the way, just because he goes to AA, is that what I heard? Is Yeah,
he said his AA sponsor. So yeah.
okay. Your AA sponsor doesn't know anything about this. If you want to deal with intimacy relationships, you know, you need to talk to people who have those problems. And as much as I love AA or NA or CA, it's very clear that you're supposed to be there to talk about those issues. So if you want to be among a group of men or women who are saying, well, this is how I do dating, or this is, that's where you need to go. One of the support groups you give away for free, one of the 12-step programs. I think you need to hear other, or maybe even a group therapy where a therapist runs an intimacy or relationship group, because these are things you learn from others, you know, and not just from some therapist telling you things, but from really getting to know folks and seeing, by the way, everyone does it a little different. So where do you fit? What's right for you when you're dating, when you're in a relationship? It may not fit with what I say. So I think you have to listen to a lot of people and a lot of answers. By the way, Tammy, I wanted to recommend two books
Uh-huh.
that I just love and find. So for the single people, there's a book called If the Buddha Dated by a friend of mine named Dr. Charlotte Castle. And it's really a book to spiritual dating, but she talks about, you know, you got to be attracted, you got to, and then she wrote another book called If the Buddha Married. And she moved from what dating would be on a spiritual plane to being married on a spiritual plane. I think for marriages, the book We Do by Dr. Tatkin, If the Buddha Married, those are really good books, I think, about looking toward the positive side of how do we grow our relationship intimacy, not just our sexual intimacy.
Well, I'm going to give a little heads up too, because you're scheduled to do a podcast with somebody that's dating deeper. So there will be a podcast that will be launching in the next couple of weeks that will talk specifically about this topic. So I'm really excited about that. So watch for that on Sex, Love, and Addiction podcast. Next question. My husband is a recovering sex addict. He has had a lot of trauma in his early childhood and teen years that led to his long-term cyber sex affair, chat room affairs, and porn. This is what I believe. He talked about this with a therapist, but they continue to focus on his addiction. We are in couples therapy, and I have my own therapist. I feel strongly that he needs to address his trauma, or he will never feel emotionally strong. Are my feelings correct?
Well, I think you need to let the therapist do the therapy. I really do. And I'll tell you how it works with trauma. It's really very simple. If you have a behavior problem, you're having sex with strangers, you're drinking, you're using, you're gambling, most of the time when we're doing that on a regular basis, a couple of things happen. We feel bad about ourselves. We have shame. We have secrets. Drama happens. Someone finds out something. We run out of money. We get a disease. So we're also often before we stopped our addiction, we're either running around with secrets or trauma or drama or issues or self-hatred, and the therapy never really gets anywhere because I bring in so much baggage from my acting out that I really can't focus on anything deeper. And so, you know, I think most of us would say that you really need to do the basic work of healing the behavior first, and then you can look at trauma. The only exception to that would be, in my experience, if someone cannot, there's so much trauma and they're so constantly triggered that going to therapy, going to meetings, getting all the support they can in an outpatient setting doesn't help them, then they need to come see us or go to another treatment program, because treatment really is in part for, I mean, it's for people in crisis for sure, but it's also for people who've tried a whole bunch of things and they're working really hard and they're just not getting where they want to get to. And it's maybe not because they're not trying hard enough, but because they get triggered a lot to trauma, and that keeps them from focusing on the addiction. And so they bounce back and forth. And in people who really need to treat both at the same time in order to stabilize them, they need residential treatment. In general, I think that someone needs to have at least 6 months away from all their sexual behaviors, sobriety, before I would start to deeply look at trauma. But let me say trauma does have a place in early work, and let me say in early recovery, and let me tell you what it's about. It's a great shame buster, meaning most of us addicts, well, active addicts, especially sex addicts, we walk around and think, especially when it's all undercover, that we're the worst people in the world. We are unlovable. I mean, we really feel crappy about ourselves once it's all out there. And, darn, I lost my point there. I wanted to say something about that. Sorry, hold on, Tammy. Is this one? Oh, I see. Actually, I lost my thread. So why don't we just keep going? Sorry.
Okay.
Unless you want to pick it up.
No, well, I had two thoughts. First of all, it says he has his therapist, but I wanted to make sure that it's a therapist that's trained to work specifically with this. Unfortunately, often people go to a generalist therapist that doesn't have the training. So I'd be a little, I'd be a little concerned about that. That would be the one caveat to that. And also the couples therapy. I mean, my experience, and Dr. Rob has way more experience than me, but my experience with that is it's great to hold the space, but trying to do marriage therapy, if there's you didn't also indicate how long he's been in recovery. And I always think there's a period of abstinence, there's a period of sobriety, and then recovery is the journey, so if it's been under the 6 months that Dr. Rob was talking about, that's really early, and expecting to work on all those things that are absolutely the flare-ups and triggers for relapse might be problematic. Again, Dr. Rob,
I think I remembered my answer.
Please.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think, again, we're kind of crossing each other tonight. I wanted to mention the reason that we do look at trauma and early treatment. Some of us feel so crappy about ourselves and we think we're such awful people. And we, when we get down there, believe me, that's part of what shows up in treatment is, oh my God, I really did this. What kind of horrible person am I? I think it's really useful for me to say, you're not necessarily a horrible person who means to hurt people, but let's talk a little bit about what happened to you. How did you get here? And in a little encapsulation of their trauma, we can say at the beginning, well, we're not going to deeply invest in that yet, but it helps make sense about how you got here and why you have these problems. They didn't just manifest out of clear air, and they didn't happen because you were born bad. They happened because all these things happened. But then I leave the trauma in a box as something to look at to say, I'm not a bad person. Things happened to me. It's not who I am. It's what happened to me and where I ended up. But then I leave it alone until my belief, they have to get some handle internally about the out of control behavior, because you have to understand in early recovery, whether you're an alcoholic, a sex, if I drop a pencil, and it was my favorite pencil, I might go drink. I might go act out. We are so intolerant of tension and stress and emotions that's why we're away in the first place, right? That's why we do what we do to feel. Yeah, you try. It brings up all these feelings. Not we're doing work with all those things I have for you there too.
You're really freezing up tonight. I'm sorry, but it's definitely you. So sorry, but I think your bandwidth is getting ocean waves off the Mercury in retrograde. So what I heard you saying is that we are intolerant of anything. So we drop a pencil, we lose a pencil, whatever, it's our favorite pencil, we're going to be intolerant, and that is going to be triggering for us. So there's went Dr. Rob. So we are almost out of time, and there's so many good questions. I so wish we would not run out of time, but I don't know what, hang on, I'm going to see. Dr. Rob is saying it's 5:58. I'm going to click and hit OK. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to invite you all back next week, or come to Dr. David's webinar on Wednesday night at 5 p.m. I would invite you to bring your questions there as well, but come back again next week. Dr. Rob will be back, and we'll see if we can get them better internet. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Join the drop-in groups. Again, sexandrelationshiphealing.com. Under events, you'll see all the events, all the drop-in groups, all the webinars. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for your patience tonight, too. Definitely technical issues. Bye.